Hi, this is Andy Hoffman, Marketing Director of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. Miles Franklin is one of the nation's largest bullion dealers, in business since 1989, with not only an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating, but not a single registered complaint in our 26-year history. In a very competitive business, we distinguish ourselves with industry-leading customer service, from a sales force averaging 2 decades of precious metals experience, a unique storage program with Brinks Montreal, which we believe is the industry's safest and most practical and cost-effective, and perhaps the best free economic blog on the planet. Fortunately, Miles Franklin is blessed with some of the best communicators in our business, which in an industry infamous for opaqueness has enabled us to build long-term relationships with clients, vendors, distributors, and the precious metals community. To wit, the firm is still operated by the father and son team that founded it, David Miles Schectman and his son Andy. David still contributes regularly to the blog he started more than a decade ago, while Andy speaks at conferences, tapes podcasts, and participates in targeted informational events such as this one, along with his main job of servicing clients. To that end, this is the third special podcast we have taped in the past year. The first being in October 2014 titled Brinks Montreal Storage Program, and the second 2 months ago titled Swaps, Trades, and Repatriations, in which we discussed myriad cost-effective precious metal strategies we can help you effectuate. Today, the podcast is titled State of the Bullion Industry, and where we intend to discuss one of the most important aspects of your precious metal investment decision, which, though no different than any other business, is particularly relevant due to the broad lack of regulation in the precious metals industry, which is the importance of performing due diligence before choosing a dealer to transact with, whether for buying, selling, or storage. Moreover, given that the U.S. Mint again suspended Silver Eagle sales yesterday, again in response to a vicious cartel paper attack, which again prompted massive physical demand, we'll follow the discussion of bullion industry fundamentals with an update on what Andy sees in terms of supply and demand trends. Back to the original topic, in two decades in our industry, we have come across some of the most honest people we know and some of the most crooked. Often there is no way to know who's who until after the fact, but fortunately the internet provides us with enough information to reduce the risk of being scammed. Word of mouth is always the best alternative, but websites like the Better Business Bureau provide valuable, objective data regarding both Miles Franklin and its competitors. In our case, depicting the aforementioned A-plus rating with not a single client complaint since opening our doors in 1989. Unlike most retail businesses, bullion dealers work specifically with the transfer of money, and thus in many ways resemble banks. In other words, very large sums are often transacted, which is why it's of paramount importance to know who you're dealing with. As the old saying states, you get what you pay for, and when transacting large sums, the service aspect is just as important, if not more so, than the price paid. Of course, price matters, specifically the premium paid over the prevailing spot price. However, if you look at the websites of various dealers, you'll find their prices aren't very different after all. And if you see someone selling at prices well below average, it's a good bet something's fishy. Just ask the dozens of clients of Tolving Inc., which last year went bankrupt with millions of clients' funds in hand. For years, Tolving's selling prices were well below the industry average, in effect attempting to make up for low margins with volume. However, once demand weakened, which today is not dramatically better, the Ponzi scheme his business turned out to be was exposed. To that end, the catalyst for today's podcast is the news that another longtime competitor, Bullion Direct, may well be headed for the same fate, per the notification put up on its website last week proclaiming, quote, Bullion Direct has experienced significant transactional delays. To avoid further inconvenience or other adverse consequences to our customers, Bullion Direct is suspending its operations as it attempts to resolve these issues. Now, given this background, I'd like to introduce Miles Franklin's president and co-founder, Andy Schekman. Andy, how are you doing on this very late night?
I'm doing good, Andy. For putting this together. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to the Mint suspending Silver Eagle sales yesterday, let's start with some questions about bullion industry regulation. To start, what laws guide the business of coin shops, coin dealers, and other purveyors of precious metal bullion? And how do the laws in Miles Franklin's home state of Minnesota differ from those of the other 49?
Well, there are no laws that govern this industry, Andy. This is a somewhat, I guess you could say, the wild, wild west still. In a respect, there are no federal guidelines. there really is no oversight in this industry, and reputation is really the guiding factor. If you have a good reputation, you stay in business. If you have a bad reputation, it catches up with you, as some of my counterparts in the industry have found out. It really is a situation where if you have a good reputation, that's really the most important thing. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, it is the only thing that I would focus on if I were looking to buy gold and silver from any company, is what is their reputation in a non-regulated industry. And it's pretty easy to find out about a company. You go to the Better Business Bureau, you go to the chat rooms, you go to Google, you'll find out very, very quickly if a company has a good reputation or not. State of Minnesota, however, felt that that wasn't good enough and is the only state in the country that is regulating this industry. We are beholden to the Commissioner of Commerce, unlike any other state. As a precious metals dealer, we have to background check all of our employees each year. We have to post an enormous surety bond, and we are licensed and regulated as if we sold securities or insurance. So I do know that many of my counterparts in this industry have refused to do business in the state of Minnesota because they themselves as well would be responsible for background checks, compliance officers, surety bond, the whole 9 yards. And when you do a couple $100 million a year in business as we do, a surety bond is a very onerous endeavor, to say the least.
Great. Now some questions about how the bullion industry works. For a potential buyer, how can one obtain a quote from a dealer like Miles Franklin, and where can they go to compare this quote to others?
Well, typically this is done online, and this is where there's an awful lot of misleading going on. There are companies out there that are purposely posting things that are misleading. I can think of one or two companies that will issue quotes, and when you look at the quote, it looks like a great price, but it's not until you get to the final checkout stage that they add shipping and insurance on each coin, making it more and more level. I think the best way to get a quote in this industry is to give a phone call to the company and get to know the people you're talking to. Don't just make a purchase by a pretty website and a low price. That's a big mistake. And there are a lot of people out there that will tell you that's a big mistake. Those people that entrusted their money to certain companies that are now either defunct or going defunct, that is a big mistake. We feel doing business is much like anything in life. It revolves around communication and around relationships. And give us a call and ask us for a price of an item that you're looking for. We'll give you a detailed quote, shipping included, and it's as simple as that. And as far as placing an order, it couldn't be easier. We lock it in on a verbal handshake after the price and quantity is agreed upon. We can accept payment by wire, by personal check, or by ACH. Once the payment is done, the transaction is complete. It's that simple. There are no get to know your client forms, much like you'd find in any other normal investment. When I say normal, I mean any security or brokerage firm, insurance company, bank, anything along those lines will carry the get to know your client form. We don't have that in this industry. It's a phone call, it's an agreement, a handshake, if you will, an email sent for confirmation, payment received, product sent. That simple.
Okay, great. Now, for that matter, if someone wanted to sell precious metals to Miles Franklin, either held in their own possession or from a third-party facility, how would they go about doing that?
Same way, only in reverse. If it's held at a depository, it's a transfer request form. Generally speaking, it's some sort of a written request. If it's metal that's held directly by the client, we assist them in packaging it and insuring it. Once it's sent to us by registered and insured mail and received, we immediately send payment. We guarantee the highest bid price in the country if the metal was purchased from us. We won't charge any buyback commissions. And typically, even if it wasn't, we typically are the highest bid price in the country. Whenever a client is sending product back, we tell them to use registered and insured U.S. mail. It is the safest way. And with our insurance and our assistance, it can be really easy to do as well.
And for the record, when you are doing that, as I did it, the post office will not necessarily know the value of what you're sending because we will have it insured outside of the post office, which is very important.
If the insurance exceeds the registered limit, yes, that is the case. But moreover, they don't need to know what you're shipping. The only thing they need to know is if it's hazardous or flammable, the 3 or 4 questions they ask everyone who brings a package. Outside of that, if it doesn't fit that criteria, then it is of no interest to them. Really, they have no really no reason to ask that of anyone.
Okay, great. Now, prior to Tolving's bankruptcy last year, how common was it for potential clients to aggressively price around, asking Miles Franklin to match the lowest available price, which was often from firms like Tolving and Bullion Direct? And has this changed in the ensuing 15 months since Tolving's bankruptcy, or in your view, is price still the defining factor in the buying decision process?
Yeah, I've stopped trying to be Tolving. I stopped long ago trying to match those prices, and it's very common. Like I was saying earlier, we live in a very homogenous society where people focus on price, and I think that's a mistake. I think you focus on reputation, you focus on good people, you focus on other things other than just price. And there are a lot of people out there who still aggressively price shop, but I will say I think it's starting to rub off. More and more people are more concerned about reputation. The bottom line is this: if I were to try to be a Tulving or a Bullion Direct, making 1/3% on a transaction, in other words, making $30 selling a $10,000 mint box, I won't be here in a few years to help you A, add to your portfolio, or B, sell. And then you can try to find somebody else. Where I come from, running a business is about making a fair living, a fair wage, and being there to help your clients. And, I can honestly say that in 30 years, or 26 years rather, we've never overcharged one person. And we do the best we can to make a decent living, but moreover to provide good service and a very, very fair price to our client base. And we've stopped trying to match those companies because, quite frankly, more and more will go under. More and more of these companies who are giving things away will go under. And just like Tulving did, just like Bullion Direct is facing, and just like others that I could name that I'm choosing not to right now, that I believe are on the cusp of doing the same thing.
Right. And generally speaking, for people not aware, as I said, the industry is relatively opaque. Margins for bullion dealers are razor thin to start with. And again, the talk about the best possible price, the difference between, let's say, Tolving's price and our price really isn't that much to start with. It really just is a matter of the mindset of someone who really wants to get the lowest price. It's really not that big of a difference. And when you include all the other aspects Andy's talking about, it's a gigantic difference in risk.
Well, that's just it. I mean, we did $240 million in business last year, Andy, and our average margin was about 1.5%. And there are some orders. We're one of the few companies that doesn't have an order minimum. So John Doe calls to buy 6 Silver Eagles for a Christmas gift, he'll pay 3%. But John Doe Jr. calls and wants to spend $100,000 on an assortment of gold and silver eagles. He may pay under 1% in order for us to be competitive. This is a razor thin margin industry. If you're not doing a few $100 million in business, you're really not making a good living whatsoever, or you're overcharging people. And so the bottom line is that yes, you want to charge a fair price, and but you don't want to give in and start selling things in order to compete with the online retailers, the Johnny-come-latelys who haven't been here for 26 years. Because if you do, you find yourself swept up in a race to the bottom. And when it matters, when people need us most, we won't be here.
Okay, and to finish this topic, where would you say Miles Franklin stands relative to competitors not just in terms of the price clients can buy bullion for, but what they can sell and store it for?
It's a matter of pennies on silver. At most, it's a matter of a few dollars on gold. I would like to think we are right there with the most respected companies in the country. We're not the least expensive, and by no means are we anywhere near the most expensive. What we are is we're realistic, and I think you could say we're near the top in competitiveness, and we are always willing to work with people and to compete if we have to. If it's a company that I'm being compared to that I think is a legitimate company, a good company that represents the public well, then I'm happy to do the best I can to match that deal. But if it's a deal with a company like Bullion Direct or Kitco, who's in their seventh round of bankruptcy protection and in receivership, I won't, because I think that there are other things going on that are more important to talk about, that aren't always as transparent as the price on the screen.
Okay, next question. What is it that makes Miles Franklin unique in terms of why potential clients would choose it over another bullion dealer, excluding price competitiveness?
Well, I mean, show me a business that's been around for 26 years, that's done over $5 billion in cumulative sales, that's never had a customer complaint, ever. Show me a company where you can Google the owner's name and the company's name and the principal's names and not find one negative remark, that's been in business for 26 years. I don't mean to harp on reputation. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what I am trying to say is that it is probably the most important thing to fall back on in this industry, because it is federally non-regulated. There is no governmental oversight to slap our wrist, throw us in jail, or to do anything for that matter. And that's why you hear so many stories of people getting ripped off by coin dealers. And so if you can find a company like ours that has a very, very good reputation and has been in business for a while, that to me is the most important thing. And there are others out there like us who fit that bill, been in business for a while, have a good reputation, can't find anything bad about it, A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, competitive in price. Well, where we stick out is guys like you, Andy. The service that we provide with our newsletter, I think, is unlike anyone else in the industry. We spend a lot of money and a lot of effort, you know that more than anybody, to give people real, honest, objective information. We don't charge anything for it. And the level of information that we put out is on par with the most expensive pay-for sites on the planet. So you put it all together, you have an honest company that's a family-run company that's been in business for 2.5 decades. It's never had a customer complaint, that it charges fair prices and gives the best non-biased, objective information possible out to the public for free. That to me is a company that is deserving of business.
Okay, now last question on this topic before we get to the business itself, what's going on with gold and silver. How do you view the current state of the bullion industry in general in terms of demand, distribution channels, and the degree of desperate sales tactics from competitors? In other words, do you feel the industry at current demand levels is financially healthy, breaking even, or in some measure of distress?
Well, prior to the last 2 days, I would say it is in distress. I would say that the model that most of my competitors, well, let me back up and simply say that, 10, 15 years ago, there were 1 or 2 competitors out there that I considered to be legitimate. 5 or 6 years ago, now we have 10 times that. And in any market where you have 13 years of positive returns, you're going to have people who think they can do it too and jump on board. And many of these companies have created this low price online craze. And I think in general, that works when the prices are continually rising and the demand is high. We used to get 200 phone calls a day back then. Lately, it's more like 30 or 40 phone calls a day. Certainly enough to still do a couple hundred million in business, but not enough to sustain business if you don't have a big client base. And so I think there are a lot of companies out there that are on the verge of big trouble. Bullion Direct proves that. Kitco proves that. Hannes Tolving proves that. And there are others out there that prove it. And others that I'm convinced are one step away from the same thing. And again, I'm not going to mention any names. I mentioned Kitco because it is public knowledge. They are in their 7th round of bankruptcy protection, and they are in receivership. I mentioned Bullion Direct because it's all over the news lately. I mentioned Hannes Tolving because it is true. He filed bankruptcy and absconded with many millions of dollars of client money. This is all true. The rest of it is speculation. I speculate there are a lot of companies hanging on by a thread. I speculate there are a lot of companies doing desperate things. Desperate people do desperate things. And, you know, I would simply say to you that before this is all said and done, the number of companies out there offering precious metals will probably be a fraction of what they are right now. Kind of like it was not too many years ago when everyone knew someone who sold mortgages. Not so much anymore. So at this point, I'm fairly concerned, I guess, about the state of the market and my competitors. And fortunately, we've always kept ourselves in a good position. In 26 years, we've never taken out a bank loan, and I don't think we will start now. So we have never bitten off more than we can chew, whether it be in brick and mortar or fancy offices or the things that you need to run this business. We try to keep it razor thin and pass on those savings to our clients and make sure we make enough money so that we're here to turn on the lights and open the doors tomorrow.
Okay, good answers. Now, I'd like to shift the discussion's focus to what occurred starting yesterday when yet again a massive, comically blatant cartel paper raid, in this case to prevent precious metals from gaining safe haven momentum in the wake of Sunday's historic Greek referendum, caused physical demand to jump so sharply the U.S. Mint was again forced to suspend Silver Eagle sales, just as it did following the now infamous paper raids of October 2008 and April 2013, among others, not to mention when prices surged in April 2011. As I wrote in yesterday's coincidentally timed article, First Signs of a 2008-like Silver Shortage, only this time it will be far worse, much about what we are seeing in the world's financial markets today, notwithstanding historic manipulation, is eerily similar to 2008, as is unquestionably the horrific global economic situation as exemplified by what is going on in Greece. Not to mention this year's hideous commodity plunge to within a hair's breadth of not only the 2009 lows, but key support levels of the past 40 years. Unquestionably, global precious metal demand is at an all-time high, although far more so in Eastern markets, partly due to their historic affinity to gold and silver's timeless monetary value, but the fact that their currencies have been in free fall, as in India, Russia, and Japan, causing precious metal prices to rise sharply in their local currencies. However, the so-called strong dollar, which more than anything acts as a liquidity vacuum during times of crisis due to its superior breadth, along with the U.S. headquartered activities of the gold cartel, has caused sentiment in the States to be extremely weak, even as U.S. Mint silver sales have hit new records for 3 years running. To that end, let's ask Andy a few questions about what he's seeing, starting with what silver bullion demand has been like in recent weeks and since yesterday's Mint suspension announcement in terms of availability, premiums, and delivery times. Andy.
Well, up until recently, I would say over the last months, silver supply has been fantastic. We have been stocked with all different kinds of silver: silver eagles, silver maple leafs, silver hawks, funnel web spiders, silver bars, silver rounds, you name it, we had it, and a real good supply. Over the past 2 days, we've done more business than we have in probably the last 2 weeks combined. I would say we did, I don't know, $8-10 million worth of sales in the past few days alone, and a large portion of that in silver. to the point now where virtually everything we have is either back ordered or sold out. And this is how it happens. This is what happened in 2008. And Andy, you know, you've been with me long enough in all of the public speaking we've done where I have set a central theme where I believe big money with leverage is suppressing the price of metals so that they can buy the physicals on the cheap. You know, when we talk about the levering of the marketplace in order to drive down the prices and perhaps a bigger agenda with those prices being driven down, you look at, for example, if you were to call your stockbroker and tell he or she that you wanted to margin $100,000 because you want to buy some stocks, you think today is the day to do it. If you deposit $100,000 with that brokerage account, by law, you can margin it double. You can now buy $200,000 worth of stock. If your account value drops below that 50% margin limit, you'll get a margin call. When it comes to commodities, however, if I buy a 100-ounce gold contract, currently it costs me somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,500. That $3,500 is controlling $130,000. So I believe very, very strongly that big money has been selling futures contracts of all of these commodities that we see, from zinc to copper to precious metals to fossil fuels, you name it. They're driving down the prices and on paper, and they're buying the world's physical supply. You look at a company like JP Morgan, in the middle of all of this silver carnage over the last year or two, they've amassed nearly 60 million ounces of physical silver. You look at the US Mint. As the price hits its low point for the year, the US Mint suspends production as they've run out of supply. This is a situation where I truly believe that there are bigger forces than you and I that are driving down the prices on paper of all of the world's commodities so that they can accumulate them at subsidized levels without competition. And so I think that price is a tool of misdirection. The physical demand could not be stronger. And in the last 2 days, it's like someone flipped a switch and the demand for silver is so high that, you mark my words, if this stays like this for another couple of days, you will find just about every company in America sold out of silver. It's how it happened in 2008. In 2008, the price of silver went from 21 to 9 in 2 days. And within a week or less, every major mint in the world was sold out of product. Every major refiner was sold out of product. Every dealer on the teletype, on the certified exchange, was sold out of product. The US Mint was shut down 8 times in 08. The Canadian Mint and the Austrian Mint were working 24 hours a day, 3 8-hour shifts, and they were 10 to 12 weeks back ordered, while charging 100% premiums for Eagles or Maple Leafs. $9 silver, $18 Maple Leafs or Eagles anywhere in the country, with 8 to 12 week delivery delays. The Rand Mint in South Africa in 08 ran out of product for the first time in 60 years, and the Perth Mint shut down in August of that year, taking no new business for the rest of the year. So when we talk about falling prices and accentuating demand, there is a great disconnection, Andy, a great disconnection that is growing and I think will define the marketplace before it's all said and done. And that disconnection is between price and demand. A falling price is usually indicative of a waning demand, which should indicate a plethora of supply. It's anything but that. This price action is driven down on paper and paper alone in an effort to gobble up the real world physicals. And it's the only way that I've ever been able to explain how the price of something can fall, in the case of 08, by 60%, and within 1 week, not one piece of silver to be found anywhere in the United States. So I think that, again, here we are at the doorstep of another type of event where the price gets driven down. The US Mint starts the daisy chain by running out of product. Dealers start selling everything else, and all of a sudden everything is back ordered, delayed, and premiums are rising. So is this the beginning? I'm not sure, but this is how it started in 08 and several times since, not to the same magnitude as 08. But again, I do believe in the end, the lack of physical product will define the market more than anything else to people trying to buy it.
Right, and to that matter, I encourage everyone to read my article yesterday, First Signs of a 2008 like silver shortage, where I that in that article and many others, I discuss how the supply demand situation is dramatically tighter now than it was in 2008. People don't even realize in 2008 when we ran out, the U.S. Mint only sold 19 million ounces of silver. They're on pace to sell 46 million this year, and of course, I believe that silver supply, if it hasn't peaked, it will shortly and start plummeting as the mining industry falls apart. So you have a lot more issues going on that are only going to make the situation tighter. Now, Andy, what about gold? It's obviously it gets less attention here in the States because silver always seems to be in these shortage situations. There definitely has been an increase in interest, but not to the extent of silver. What are you seeing in the gold market?
Nothing yet. Still flush with supply. In all of the years this has happened, I've seen maybe twice where gold was affected, gold bullion. The first time I ever saw it was the end of 2007. The U.S. Mint shut down in October or November, and you couldn't get gold eagles or buffaloes. And then the other mints started to run out of product. And it really opened my eyes at that point to what can happen very quickly when demand for coins outpaces supply. It's been a very, how can I say, it's a very fluid market, and it changes very quickly. And what can be flush with supply one day, a la 2 days ago in this industry, in my company, and it was one of the best. I bet you we had $15 million worth of silver on hand in stock. To by tomorrow, we're nearly sold out of everything. And that's how quickly it changes. But we're just one company. You have other companies out there doing the same thing, and many people doing the same thing in a very, very finite supply chain market. And within a couple of days of this type of market action, overnight, you'll find stuff gone. And the US Mint, when they shut down and they don't have any product to be sold or to be offered, then the Canadian Maple Leafs will dry up. The Austrian Philharmonics will dry up. The junk silver will dry up. Everything will dry up, and then people will get scared that they're going to miss out, and I better call quick. I can't tell you how many people have called us saying, I noticed your article saying things were disappearing and the US Mint shut down. The one thing that scares people more than anything, more than rising prices, more than falling prices, is the inability to get it. And everyone seems to think they'll wait till the price falls and then they'll jump on board. That is the fatal flaw in all of this, in that every time we see the price fall, we see demand pick up immeasurably. We see product availability decrease immeasurably, and we always see premium upticks, always. And in the past 2 days, we've seen the price of Silver Eagles and Maple Leafs be ratcheted up about 35 cents, I think, maybe 40 cents, maybe more. And, you know, it'll continue tomorrow if the supply chain doesn't get any better. So, you know, I've said to everyone who will listen, this market will define itself by an inability to source product, and more than rising prices, more than anything else. When the 5 major mints of the world run out of product, it's game over. You got the US, the Canadian, the South African, the Austrian, and the Australian. Forget about the Chinese mint, they don't sell enough to matter. Forget about the British mint, same thing. Forget about the Mexican mint, same thing. You have, you know, a few other mints, but those 5 major mints, when they run out of product, it's game over, literally. Because the thing about precious metals is that you know, people hang on to them because they get scared. And if all of a sudden people hear that there's nothing to be had, doesn't matter what the price is doing, they're going to hang on to their metals. And I can tell you that, you know, we've done more in buybacks in the last year or two than we have in the past 15 years. And I think there has been a good deal of capitulation by the weak hands. But in general, when we sell something, we don't see it again. And that is the very nature of precious metals. You buy it, you put it in your safe, you hope you never need to use it. If you do, you're damn glad you have it. And if not, you give it to your grandchildren and hope that they can give it to their children. So, you know, the bottom line is, I think right now, gold supply is fine. Silver supply isn't. And it wouldn't take very much at all of any type of black swan event for the gold market to follow suit to the silver market. We saw it in '08. Wouldn't surprise me to see it again.
Right. Okay, well, this is a lot to digest here. Obviously, we're in unique times, not just in the precious metal industry, but the entire global economy and financial markets, which is why we did this podcast and why we did our other two podcasts and why we'll continue to do others to educate you. Hopefully, these questions give you a bit of incremental clarity as to how the bullion industry works, competitive landscape looks like, and some of the red flags one should look out for, the most important of which is anyone attempting to sell at prices significantly below the average. Now, if you have any further questions, please call us at 800-820